Hi guys and welcome back. Today I am experimenting and playing with this new pen supply that I got. I just found it at the store. I bought it with my own money and it sounded really interesting and I was really excited about it because, as probably all of us know, I love adding embellishments to my original pieces of artwork, especially gold and silver or anything iridescent. So yeah, I want to try this one out and see how it would work for me. I have used Cintiq gold watercolors in the past. I use those actually primarily when I'm adding this type of detail, and I love those. They're great, but they do have certain downsides. When I saw these pens, the huge benefit that I see with them is that they're very transportable, which means I can take them with me to conventions and they're a lot easier to use. So that was one thing that kind of caught my eye, and I was actually looking for signing pens anyways, so I grabbed these, and I am completely blown away with how much I love these pens. So I'm going to talk a bit about them, and we're going to make a piece of artwork using them. But first off, I will tell you what the pens actually are. They are Pilot, and each one has their own name, but it's a Pilot silver marker or a Pilot gold marker. It's an extra fine point paint marker, and it came in a set of both of these, so I could try out both of them, but they also come individually. And I'll have a link to the pens that I'm using down in the description, as well as all the other tools that I'm using and everything that I use to make this painting. But yeah, I got the set of them to try them out. They're the kind where you have to shake it up and press down onto the nib so that the paint actually saturates the nib. But they are really, one, very opaque, which is a key thing that I wanted. I needed something that would have 100% coverage from the first stroke. I did not want to have to cover over it or have the risk of it being something where I'd have to build it up and potentially it could pull up what is already down, which I have had experiences with other pens like that where if it doesn't cover in the first swipe, there's no chance of being able to actually build it up because of the quality of the ink or the paint. So this one's really nice. It's definitely 100% on the opacity. Or, well, I shouldn't say 100%. It's pretty high. It's very opaque. I find that the silver one is just a bit more opaque than the gold, and the silver is significantly brighter and shinier. So the silver marker by far is my favorite. The gold one's really nice, but it has more of a dull finish to it, and it's not as light colored as the silver, which kind of makes sense. The silver is basically like just a step below white. It's just this really metallic white color almost. So the gold, of course, would be a bit darker, but it doesn't have that luminosity. It doesn't reflect light quite as much, which is definitely a downside. I would have liked one that was really shiny gold to match and have this other option that would have the same impact, which they don't. So the silver one is absolutely my favorite one. If I'm going to repurchase, it's probably going to be the silver one, but I'm glad to try out the gold one. It certainly has its applications. And at the very beginning, I was showing where I used it on top of watercolors that I had already done, and I think that's really key to getting a good idea of how these pens work and how I wanted to use them, because I wanted to see how much they could pop off of similarly valued watercolors or what types of backgrounds they look best on. And again, I found that the silver just really stood out. It was really bright. And I know I already said that, but that's one of the things that I loved about it. Once I was putting it on top of these watercolors and how that silver would just shine off of the color below it, I loved it. But there's also benefits in the fact that the gold, where it's a little bit more subtle, I could use it more readily in different areas on the painting. So that's one thing that I have to be aware of, and oftentimes I easily overdo, and that's where I put metallic details too much over the whole painting or in too many spots. So not necessarily a lot of coverage of the metallic details, but they're kind of evenly spread throughout, which means that it draws the eye all over the page rather than keeping them at the focal point, which is important. So sometimes I let my excitement of using these metallic paints, I let those come first, and then my design senses kind of take a backseat. So I need to make sure that when I'm using things like this, I am strategic on where I'm placing it, which actually is a little bit of a mistake that I make in this painting, but I'll talk a little bit about it and what I actually did to correct that. But anyways, I was saying, the silver, I found that when I did make that kind of a mistake, it was a lot more apparent, and it does draw the eye a lot more immediately, which is great. It's something that I can use. But I also found that the gold, because it was more subtle, meant that I could use it in in more subtle patterning and I could use it more readily without it suddenly being this huge attention grabbing detail. So as I'm working on this painting, I eventually add part of the patterning in her sweater as this gold. And I love that because it is just a little bit over the top of what I have going on with the watercolors, with this extra, just a little bit of a shine to it. But it wasn't really distracting. So it was nice. It was good. It has its benefits and it has its downside. So if I wanted it to be something that was really a focal point to the painting, I couldn't really use it for that. Or I would have to be a lot more careful about what I was placing it on top of to get that impact. Okay, so more little details about these pens. They are permanent, pretty much. I mean, you could probably scrape it off or do something to get it off of your piece, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's pretty much there. With my Cintiq, I'm able to lift it up actually quite a bit, so it's a lot more forgiving. Once you put these pens down, it's pretty much there. So it's something to be aware of and to be a little bit more careful and thoughtful, which is good advice for myself because, again, I like to go overboard, and with my Cintiq, I find sometimes I need to remove it a little bit, and that helps. But for these, they're pretty much there. I did, like I said, go a little bit overboard with the silver. What I actually ended up doing, it was like towards the end. All of this application that I'm talking about is at the very end of the piece, but after I finished painting it, I added these little silver star dots to the background. But I did them pretty much evenly over all of the background, and I put way too many dots. So when you shine it in the light, it's hard to know where exactly to look. So I tried a few different options to cover up the dots so that they weren't metallic anymore. They were just like white dots. So I went with my gel pen, and that actually ended up beating up on top of the paint, and it didn't stick to it as well. So I believe I went in with gouache, which it did stick better. So it is something to keep in mind that you can cover it, but only with certain things, and you'd only get a certain quality to it. So I would not recommend trying to cover up a larger area with something else. I think you'd really see a texture change and it would look a little bit more overworked. But there are certain things that you can combat having too much of this, but that is what I ended up having to do. And once I did that and let only a few metallic dots remain, it really helped. It helped keep the eye where it should be. But let's talk a little bit about the painting and the rest of the stuff that I'm doing. So I specifically wanted to use colors in this painting that would work with both the silver and the gold in different places because I wanted to get a chance to use both of them. So I again had this really burgundy colored sweater where I'd have the gold details. I love those two colors together, and it worked out really nicely. I liked how that ended up looking. And then I also wanted the background to be this starry sky typesetting, and that would allow me to use the silver there. I also had jewelry in her face, but I think I actually ended up changing it. I believe it was originally gold, and then I went back over it with silver, which I think is the biggest. It's not biggest in terms of really detrimental to the piece, but it was probably the one mistake that I wish I could go back and redo because it created a weird texture when I layered this. So again, you don't want to do a lot of layering or building up with this paint because they're actually, and this is another little point, is it's actually pretty thick. It creates almost like a dome with the ink. So it's nice. I love it. It has this almost 3D effect sort of, but it does sit on top of the page, and when you build up more layers of it, it gets kind of mottled and textured in a little bit of a weird way. So there are certain areas on her face jewelry that got a little bit more uncontrollably textured than I would have liked. So yes, I should have just stuck with the first one that I put down and let that be the final choice. But I guess that's the thing, is that I have to try out these different tools so that I know what are the limits, and next time I can make sure that I know which color I'm putting down first, because I can't change it in that kind of a way afterwards. But yeah, it's all fun. It's fun to be able to try out things and learn what I can do with them, what I can't do with them. And oftentimes those things I don't really think about until I'm actually working on a piece, because I don't think about all the steps of how I'm going to use a piece, how it's going to incorporate into a painting until I'm actually working on it. When I'm just doing these little swatches, it's at the very beginning when I'm like testing out the pens, you don't think about all the different applications. I mean, what I really should be doing though is if I have an idea of how I want to use it and I'm working on a painting with this or with literally any other type of medium or new tool that I'm using, I should make sure that I'm using it on a scrap piece of paper first to make sure that it works. So that is something that I probably should have done. I should have tested out the layering of the inks first, but that's okay. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with my decision and the things that I learned from that. And don't forget to come say hi to me if you're going to be at the FanX Salt Lake Comic Con. That's next weekend. That's September 6th through the 8th, 2018. But I will be there at table beige 4 and 5. I love talking to you guys, so come say hi. I love it. But that is about it for today. I do have this mini painting available at my shop. I'll also be bringing her to the convention, but yes, she'll be available. There's a link in the description that'll take you right over to my shop where you can check that out or all the other art goodies that I have. But that is it for today. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.